Lebanon starts to shake. From Ozark Fiber Studios, bright and warm, he's bringing in the brand new.
It is Millsap in the Morning on this 24th day of June, 2026, and we're live in the downtown Lebanon Business District. That's a brand new way of introducing downtown Lebanon now. And we're in the Ozark Fiber Studios. Be sure to like us on Facebook and YouTube, and don't forget, you can also watch us and our previous episodes on Spotify. Don't forget, you can drop in comments in on Facebook and YouTube as we get ready for Millsap in the Morning and a great show that we've got planned here this morning. Here in Lebanon, we believe local matters, and that includes your internet. Ozark Fiber is a Missouri-based company bringing high-speed fiber internet to our community. That means faster speeds, reliable connections, and support from people who actually live and work right here. Experience the difference with Ozark Fiber. Check your availability at ozarkfiber.com. A chance of showers and thunderstorms, and then showers likely and possibly a thunderstorm after 3 p.m. Partly sunny with a high near 81. South winds around 6 miles per hour, becoming southwest in the afternoon. The chance of precipitation is about 70% today. New rainfall amounts between a tenth and a quarter of an inch, expect higher amounts possibly in the thunderstorms. A chance for showers and thunderstorms before 1 a.m., then a slight chance of showers between 1 and 4 a.m., with a slight chance of showers tonight and thunderstorms after 4. Mostly cloudy with a low around 66. Light southwest winds today and tonight, and a chance of precipitation tonight is about 30%. It's 72 in Lebanon. A pretty nice morning out there as we get the morning started here on Millsap in the Morning. This morning, we continue our series of candidate interviews as we approach the August 4th election. This week, our guest is State Representative Bill Hardwick from Pulaski County, who is running for the Senate seat in District 16, a seat that is being vacated by Justin Brown of Rolla. Last week, we heard from Hannah Kelly, who is seeking the same seat as Representative Hardwick. And then next week, we'll take a break from our candidate interviews, and Taylor Howe returns to Millsap in the Morning. We'll talk to Taylor about the 250th July 4th celebration here in Lebanon, as well as a discussion about the founding fathers of the country. So we'll have quite the conversation next Wednesday on July 1st. Back with interviews on July 8th with Don Mayhew, who is also a candidate for the Senate seat in District 16. And then on July 22nd, we'll talk to Royce Tuck, who is running for state representative in the 142nd District. And then we'll wrap up our candidate interviews on July 29th with Dr. Jeff Brown, who's running for state representative in District 142, which includes Laclede, Dallas, and Camden County. I want to mention that we'll have a special edition of Millsap in the Morning, which will be available later today, more than likely. If not, you'll get it in the next couple of days for sure. But I had a chance yesterday to speak with Missouri State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick about the stark warning that he's issued regarding the Missouri budget, which is now sitting on the desk of Governor Kehoe, as well as discussion about Amendment 5 that will be voted on in August that would gradually eliminate the Missouri sales tax. In addition, that tomorrow evening in Lebanon at 6 o'clock at the Wallace Building here in Lebanon, there'll be a town hall meeting hosted by the Americans for Prosperity Missouri regarding Amendment 5. Starts at 6, goes to 8. The doors at the Wallace Building will open at 5:30. Lebanon Now will stream the meeting live on Facebook and YouTube. Is that correct? I'm looking over to Ryan Shear, our producer, and he's nodding his head yes. And if you're not able to attend, you can watch that as we go. We got a lot to get to with Representative Bill Hardwick, and we'll do that right after this.
I'm Jeremy Goforth.
And I'm Holly Goforth, and we're with Legacy Homes. So this house sits in Legacy Trails. This is a 68-acre subdivision that sits right next to Ashley Park. Approximately 127 lots that we will be building on. What's unique about this subdivision is that we're connecting Ashley Park's trails into our subdivision that will go through our subdivision and connect back to the park.
The Legacy Trails, we have all kinds of homes. The minimum is 1,500 square foot, high efficiency, new construction homes. If you're interested in this house or any other home in Legacy Trails, we have 10 house plans available. Contact Legacy Homes at
417-718-1962 or 417-718-2051, and don't forget to look us up on Facebook.
The voice of the town with the country town ring. It's Millsap in the morning.
Bill Hardwick is with us. He is running for the state Senate seat being vacated by Justin Brown. He's from Pulaski County. He's an attorney that worked as assistant prosecutor in Pulaski County for a while and then works for a law firm out of Rolla. And welcome to the show.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So as we get this started, I think the first question that comes to mind when I talk to any political candidate is, who is Bill Hardwick?
Who's Bill Hardwick? Bill Hardwick's a father, a veteran, a family man, a conservative. Mainly, I'm somebody who's aspiring to help people. I want to be somebody who is a leader, who leads our area and aspires people to have better life, better community. I want to uplift families. I'm somebody who's had quite a journey in life, quite an incredible journey. And I try to take that experience and have compassion for people and also kind of see how we can navigate kind of our problems in society.
Tell me what that journey's been.
Well, I was born in Rolla. I went to Dixon High School. When I finished Dixon High School, I joined the National Guard to pay for college and went to Mizzou. Then got out of Mizzou, went on active duty, did time at Fort Leonard Wood, went overseas to Iraq. I was right before that, I was actually doing construction. I was helping build houses with a guy I knew from church. And I got a letter in the mail that said you got accepted to law school. And then about a week later, I got a notification you're going overseas to Baghdad. So the Mizzou held my seat. Went to Baghdad. I did route clearance. That was kind of an interesting story, too. You ever see that movie Band of Brothers?
I have.
That's what happened. There was a platoon leader. So I was there. I was doing counter ID intelligence analysis. And there was a platoon leader that came on the scene, and his NCOs wrote a letter to the battalion commander that said, we won't follow this man into combat. He's going to endanger us. So they relieved him on the spot. And then I was at brigade, and it was Colonel Mitch Bassini. He lives in Rolla now, Ranger. He said, do you want to go out there? And I said, yeah, I'll volunteer to be a sapper platoon leader. So I went out there and met those guys, like first time, never knew him before. Said, I'm Lieutenant Hardwick. You know, you don't know me, you don't know you, but we'll have to trust each other, watch each other's back. And that first week, we got hit by an IED. And at least on the radio, I was calm and kind of reacted to it in a reasonable way. And some of the NCOs said, hey, we like our chances with you. You're calm under fire. And just got to know those guys really well. I met them in country, met them in combat, became their platoon leader, got to know them really well. Extended in country, in firefights, ambushes like in May, June, July. It was actually pretty incredible in the Battle of Sauter City. Then I got home in July and started law school in August. And I remember being in law school and, almost the other students, their parents were attorneys. They came from more white-collar backgrounds than me. My dad never graduated high school, for example. So it was kind of forging my own path. And I remember everybody was concerned about their grades and, what if they're going to clerkship. And I was just sitting in that class being like, I'm alive. I was like, I'm here. Our daughter was born in Rolla. I came home on leave. She was born and brought her back home with Teresa and then left. And that first whole year and some change of Alora's life, I missed it because I was overseas and then came back and it was like reunifying with them. And that was kind of an experience too. And so that was the law school experience. When I finished that, there was a newly elected prosecutor, Kevin Hillman. I was actually interning at the Capitol as a legal researcher. I would research the constitutionality of bills and how to pass them. And I look up Supreme Court cases on bills and stuff like that. And Kevin Hillman just got elected prosecutor, and he was up there. And I said, I'm looking for a job at a law school. So he hired me as assistant prosecutor. I did that for a couple years, and then twins were coming along. And the prosecutor hours were, you're on call on weekends. I'd wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning, this, they'd be saying, we need a search warrant for this house. And I was kind of the go-to guy for that for a lot because Kevin ended up getting deployed. He's a judge now, but he didn't get deployed. So I covered down a lot for him when he was deployed. So there's, early morning search warrants, 24 holds, get up there in the morning, do 24s, go to court, do trial. End of the day, then you're talking to the county officials. It was just a high octane op tempo. So I got a job for the Department of Defense, did that the federal government, became an assistant U.S. attorney for a couple of years, and then went on active duty, went to CGSC, came back, went into private practice, did it a couple of years, and then I decided to run for state rep.
So you run for state rep, and I find this interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you decided to run for state senate. You were not term limited out.
That's right.
Most people who decide to make that next step are usually people that are term limited out. So you're giving up your House seat. I guess you're rolling the dice, so to speak, on this as far as taking the Senate seat. Why make that decision to give up your place in the House to go for the Senate?
Well, I think anytime you put your name in the ballot, you're kind of rolling the dice a little bit.
Right.
So in the House,
80% of incumbents usually win the race, but go ahead.
right. That's a good point. So in the House, I've passed a lot of bills, and I've read a lot of bills. It's actually pretty cool to be able to see your things you wrote in the Constitution and the statutes. But there's a trend in the House that when there's constituents who want something solved, they go, well, it got hung up in the Senate. Well, it got hung up in the Senate. Well, the Senate, it died in the Senate. Well, we can't fix this problem because of the Senate. So it seemed pretty obvious, and that's kind of my journey to politics anyway. It seems pretty obvious the Senate's where you need to go to solve the problem and to actually kind of move the needle and make the difference for people. And I've told that story too, even from the time in the Army where you go, why are we doing it like this? And somebody goes, well, Sergeant so-and-so said. Well, why are we doing it like this? Because Lieutenant so-and-so said, Colonel so-and-so said. Then you go, well, some politician said somewhere. So when I figured that out, I was like, well, that's where I'm going to go. If that's who's making the decisions, that's where I'm going to go. So if our main appropriations decisions, if these main issues, if it's all going to the Senate, then I'm going to go to where the heart of the problem is and try to do what I can to make a difference and to get people to work together and to solve problems and to compromise where there's room for compromise and to stand for your values where there's not room for compromise. And that seems like the place to go. So in the House, I've been really effective in the House, had a great tenure. It's not like I didn't accomplish a lot in the House. It's just like all the unfinished business of the people's business. You need to go to the Senate to effectuate it.
So Scott Fitzpatrick had an opportunity to do an interview with him yesterday, and again, that will air either today or sometime in the next couple of days here on Lebanon Now. He made a report to the governor on June 10th, but prior to that, in December, January, prior to the General Assembly convening, he made a dark statement that, hey, Missouri's budget is broken. In fact, it's written in the report on June 10th to the governor. The budget is broken. How did we get there, and how do you fix that?
So I think the journey to get there is the budget continues to inflate. And then COVID was a rapid acceleration of that because you had ARPA money, you had CARES Act money. And our state budget became accustomed to having that federal dollars match our general revenue and our other revenue sources in the state. And as the budget increases, and I think the other reps will tell you this too, there's a project or there's a reoccurring program that wants to grow with the budget. And so there's a lot of people that come to Jeff City and their livelihood is getting appropriations for that. So Missouri becomes used to it. Well, at the same time, the ARPA money's gone away, or is going away. CARES Act's gone away. Infrastructure, American Rescue Plan, it's gone away. And then our revenues, we've also, we've made some, I think, a little bit whack-a-mole kind of tax policy, right? Where we go, hey, we're going to do this tax credit here. We're going to get rid of this tax here without a comprehensive thought process about what our long-term budget looks like. Then our revenues have flattened, right? For different reasons, part of the economic cycle, part of the business cycle. So federal money's gone away. We've had a non-comprehensive, non-long-term thoughtful tax policy. And business hasn't grown the way that we've anticipated. So that's caused revenues to decline, going to decline. And almost everybody projects that the state will be in the red in the next couple of years, especially if you don't make drastic changes. So that's the first part of your question. I think that's how it happened. And the government's addiction to growing, and then people's addiction to government dollars, that's part of it too. How do you fix it? So all the problems that caused it, you have to address to fix it. You have to address spending. So where are we spending things on projects that are not for the general welfare, are not in long-term durable investments? You can identify that. I think there has to be some reform to things like Medicaid and welfare benefits. Not in the sense that we want to penalize people who are lower income. I don't believe in that. But you want to make it so the path of least resistance, what's available to people is that can get off state subsidies, that there's a pathway to them going back to work, to starting a business, to prospering, to have a better life. So our goal is not for people to be on state assistance forever. It's to make it easier and easier for people to get off of state assistance. And as we make those type of reforms, that'll be one of the major spending drivers too. Then our tax policy has to have a holistic look at it. You can't just say, I'm giving a tax credit for radio stations, right? And you can't just say they don't pay taxes, but somebody else does. You got to think about the entire state. And that term broaden the base has been really made pejorative recently with the income tax thing. But there's a sense of instead of a bunch of people paying a high tax rate, I want a bunch of people paying a lower tax rate, but more people paying taxes. So more people at work, more people having jobs. Those people are paying into the tax system. So more people prospering does mean more revenue for the state, and also means a lower tax burden. So I think that's the approach you want to take, that instead of just having a few millionaires that I tax at 70% or a couple industries that we tax to death, we have more people working, more people involved in the economy, paying a low tax rate. And then we think about what our major spending drivers are and have reforms for things that are really driving up our cost. There's some obligations statutorily the state has to pay for. Education is one of them. We've got a constitutional obligation to provide a public education. So that's a priority. I think Medicaid is a priority, especially for children with disabilities, especially for lower income families. But that doesn't mean the entire state can be on Medicaid, right? But there's Medicaid for people who need it. Our public safety system, our public justice system, the courts, highway patrol, our police officers, that's a priority for spending. And infrastructure. I don't want bridges that are going to collapse or roads that are going to collapse. Those are spending priorities. Then we've got some self-funding apparati like the MoDOT, like conservation, make sure those things are sustainable and our pension system's sustainable. But that's what I look at in submitting priorities. I think that the budget is a statement of our values, what's important. But that's kind of how I would frame the problem. And that's how you address the problem. But you can't address the problem by saying, I've got an idea, no taxes on guitars. You have to look at the entire tax system, and you have to think about there's going to be some black swans economically the next 5 years. There's going to be a recession. There's going to be some things, especially with artificial intelligence, that the economy is going to revolutionize. So what gives us the best chance at having the most options to sustain ourselves and thrive, given the variety of conditions?
Bill Hardwick is our guest on Millsap in the Morning. We'll be back with more with him right after this.
What's misunderstood is people think it's for, lazy people or quitters. It's absolutely not.
What surprises most people about disability cases?
How long it takes, how difficult it is to win the claim, how much treatment is required to win a claim. All of those things surprise clients.
Can somebody be denied if they're genuinely sick or hurt?
Yes, they can. It's very common, especially around here. I have people that are extremely disabled that have never sought medical treatment. Almost all those claimants are denied, especially at initial application.
What advice would you give someone that's scared to apply?
To pick up the phone and call me. I can talk to you about the whole process. I can tell you types of treatment to get before you apply. I can tell you basically how to apply. You can come into my office. We can fill out the application together and schedule the appointment with the Social Security Administration. There is no need to be nervous. We offer free consultations.
Call Deputy in Mizell at 877-532-2191. Free consultations, day, evening, or weekend. Get the disability benefit that is owed to you.
Warm, he's bringing in a brand new morning.
Bill Hardwick is our guest here at Millsap in the Morning as we talk about his Senate race in District 16. And a couple of things I want to get to, and you brought up artificial intelligence, and we're hearing a lot of things, and you're hosting an event in Wright County about data centers, which, by the way, AI is data center driven. And so there is a lot of concern out there, especially in rural Missouri. I was up in the St. Louis area over the weekend, out in the more rural areas around Eureka, Washington, and in that area around St. Louis, and saw signs, no data centers. A lot of people have concerns about that. I guess my question would be, are we jumping the gun to say we're going to have a moratorium, or we're going to not have any data centers? And are all data centers the same?
Yeah, those are all. That's a multi-part question too. So, data centers exist now. The data on your cloud, on your metadata from your phone, from your social media, that's being stored in a server. Ones and zeros somewhere. All that is. I think that data centers is one of those things that's popped up rapidly as an issue, even especially since Senate Bill 4. You hear about it when you're talking to people. And I think that public officials need to listen to people. If I went out to Marys County to the sale barn one morning, had coffee out there. Some of the farmers said, hey, keep the data centers out of here. Listen to them. Why? What's your concern? Is your concern that you got green grass and that's why you moved out to Marys County and you don't want to see, concrete everywhere? Okay, that's valid. Are people worried about the environment? Okay, let's talk through that. Are they worried about noise and light pollution? Are they worried about, and some people are worried about that their costs are going to go way up, including their property tax assessment. And then in about 5 years, as Moore's Law talks about, the rate of change for the technology is going to accelerate. Maybe those data centers are going to be obsolete. They're going to go away, and the local people are going to be left holding the bill. Okay, let's talk through that. Let's talk through how much electricity rates are going to go up. But I think our job is to listen to people. And if they have concerns about the water, about pollution, about the environment, about what their rural land turns into, or for example, another concern, what happened in Lake Tahoe, where there's a data center and there's a power outage, and the utility company provides power to the data center, but the 80,000 inhabitants of the area lose electricity. How do we prevent that? So those real concerns, my job as an elected official, as a leader, is to listen and try to navigate that and have that conversation. And if the majority of people say, well, this is what we want or don't want, or here's what we're concerned about, I need to address that effectively. Do I think that and people see my post, that I have concerns about artificial intelligence? I think it's a double-edged sword. I think artificial intelligence is going to accelerate the advancement of medicine. I think there's a lot of problems that are going to be solved. And I'm not negating that there's good things that are happening there. But if we become reliant on something, or the new capacity for data centers gives total surveillance to everything you're doing, well, who's watching the watchers? Is that going to be weaponized against people? I think that's a real concern too. Are we so reliant on a technology that we're not thinking for ourselves anymore, that we're not being able to do functions as human, that we lost our humanity? So technology, as it changes, there's good to it. We can learn from it, but we don't want to trample on people, human beings. That's my concern. So when I go to these town halls, we talk about that. We talk about, information theory, and we talk about, how quantum computing is going to change encryption. We have a really good discussion about that things are really going to change in America in ways people can't fathom over the next decade. And what does that mean for your life? And what does it mean for, it seems like it wasn't a Republican idea, but I think now it is a conservative idea, that you have the consolidation of power and influence in the government in the hands of a few corporations, and people in Laclede County don't feel like their voice is being heard. That's kind of one of the reasons I'm interjecting too, because even though we use Google and Meta and Microsoft and Amazon, we use those companies, and those companies have changed our lives in all kinds of ways. There are a lot of people here that don't want me just to listen to Google and Amazon and not listen to the farmers here. So I'm trying to listen and make sure that their voice is not put underneath the voice of those big tech companies. I think that's important too. So I'm trying to have a thoughtful discussion about it. I'm trying to have a realistic discussion about where the direction of our future is going. But if I have these values about, human dignity, freedom, about privacy, about private property rights, about making sure that every customer in the co-op or every customer in the utility provider is treated fairly, those are good values for us to assert too, I think.
And aren't we somewhat conflicted in all of this? Because I live on some property that's been in my wife's family since 1905, is now shared by my son. So he inherits, and my daughter will inherit a land that's been in their family for well over 100 years now. And I don't want the data center next to me. However, I also didn't want a salvage yard next to me.
Right.
And I don't want a chicken farm next to me. That we get down that road to where all of a sudden we have planning and zoning in Class 3 counties, which is something we don't want. So how do we work that as to what is the state telling me to do with my property? There's an argument to that, right?
In that there is actually, for sure. And this tension between the a liberal, classical Republican that says, hey, government, to stay out of my business. Mm-hmm. And what seems like in the conservative grassroots now that says, hey, government, come save me from business, right? And what's interesting, what you said, the same comments I hear from every commissioner, every county. I hear it from business owners in every county. So there's ideas that are percolating. And one of those ideas is, if somebody has private property, they could have bought that private property and put a junkyard on there. I've got some trucks in my yard, in my land. They could put, chickens over there, goats, whatever. And we have moved out to the country to avoid planning and zoning. And our commissioners, most of our rural commissioners, don't have the planning and zoning authority. So now we're asking for a special planning and zoning dispensation for data centers. Okay, so does that contradictory? And I've been thinking through that, and we've had discussions about so it can't just be Like you can't have, and I've been key on this, you can't have a bill targeted at a particular company. But you could say maybe we need to update some of our laws because the data centers are coming to rural areas because there are no laws out here. There is no planning and zoning. There is no, and I think that they're trying to develop faster than regulation. So is there a need for the state to say, okay, you need to validate that you're not affecting the watershed? That might be a fair thing for the state to do. You need to validate that the chemicals in the cooling thing are not being evaporated into the water cycle. You need to validate that the decibel level, because at some point there could be, and there are different genres of data centers for sure, and there are different engineering specs. And there are some that might have, that this problem is not a problem, but there are some that could be developed that the problem of noise and light pollution is a big problem. So how do we validate that it's not this crazy noise off the charts that's, being a nuisance into the houses next door? Those are things for the state to at least ask those questions about and maybe look at updating, our environmental laws and our nuisance laws and things like that. I think that's fair. Now, does that mean the county has a special zoning disposition or change? Maybe. Maybe the law is archaic because industry is moving into rural Missouri, and we'd look at that. But I'll just show you my attitude on making laws, how I've done it. I don't just go up there and go, this is what Bill Hardwick wants. I would talk to you. I would talk to the commissioners. I'd go talk to the farmers. I'd go talk to the business owners. I'd go talk to the people in the churches, and I'd go, how do you see the problem? And I go, if I do this other person doesn't like it. And then I try to figure out if there's something everybody can agree on in solving the problem that still keeps my conservative principles, keeps my personal values intact, and just kind of work at the problem that way. But instead of just dictating, let's just have a conversation and think through it and see if there's something that we can all agree on. But you're right. There's always this tension between public safety and individual rights. Where do my rights end and where do your rights begin? I can't duck toxic acid into the river. Okay, so how do we balance that with new technology? That's the conversation we should have.
One of the things that you talked about was the flattening of revenues in the state. You introduced a bill in the state legislature that died in the Senate to legalize video gambling machines in convenience stores. Hannah Kelly, one of your opponents, is against legalizing the video. Don Mayhew is kind of in the middle of the road regarding this issue. The Missouri Attorney General has just recently cracked down on a number of these operations, which are illegal under the statute now. Why are you for legalizing Missouri gambling regarding the video gambling machine?
Yeah, so, okay, that's good. And I hope we got some time to talk through it.
Sure.
So about 5 years ago, there were business owners and even the fraternals, VFWs in our area who said, hey, these folks come to our competitors. They say, you could put this machine here. We don't know if it's legal or not. So I looked at the statute, which you know from prosecution. It's you ante in, there's a game of chance, and it pays out consideration. That's the definition of gambling. The prosecutors at the time were split on it. Some said, hey, there's only one case for conviction, Eric Zahn, the prosecutor in Plymouth County, who testified in favor of my bill, as did the Prosecutors Association. So some prosecutors said completely legal. The Phelps County prosecutor at the time wrote an opinion, said it's not a game of chance. So looking at that statute, different companies, not just Torch, but a variety of companies developed these machines that either had a pre-reveal or had an element of skill in it. And they looked and smelled like slot machines, but some of them didn't meet the statutory elements of slot machines. And my point was at the time was, even if you go, hey, I feel this is wrong, the statute needs to catch up to address it, to identify it. Because, for example, a claw machine has a random, and like the arcade has a random number generator. You ante in something, even if it pays out a ticket, it's consideration. So technically speaking, a slot machine or a claw machine is a slot machine. It meets the definition of gambling. So it was obvious to me I needed to update the law somehow. Okay, so what's the solution? So ban everything. That was one approach. The ban everything at the time didn't work because, one, that wasn't viable. And then two, for example, the Lebanon VFW came and talked to me and said, hey, we have these machines. We make revenue off of it. We don't think we're hurting anybody. Okay, I thought, well, if you want to have it in a bar or whatever, there's got to be something to it. So my approach was to make rules about children can't, and by the way, the no chance games became illegal under my bill. The everything else that was not covered and not licensed became illegal. That was even in that civil federal case. It said that there's a regulatory void in Missouri, that the Gaming Commission can only regulate things that are on the casinos, but all gaming outside the casinos, they didn't have the authority to regulate. So we needed to create a regulatory authority structure, an enforcement structure. And so everything that wasn't regulated, the no chance, became illegal, but we allowed a licensing system under lottery. You had to go through a background check, go through whatever. In bars and VFWs, they could go through the license process, pay the license fee, pay the taxes on it. But I don't think it was an expansion of gambling, and I don't think I was legalizing something permanently criminal. I think I was criminalizing something that was vague, and then I was licensing something different, is what the statute read at. But also another point was that my bill gave every city and county a chance to vote on whether or not they wanted any gaming at all. So Laclede County and Lebanon could independently say nothing in Laclede County whatsoever. And if they didn't pass an ordinance that authorized something, there'd be nothing. Or they could say, yeah, our bars can have this license program. I thought that seemed fair, and it seemed fair to tax it and regulate it. No kids playing in the back room, background checks, under surveillance, that sort of thing. I thought it would really confine the amount of gaming in the state. And then you wouldn't have things that were unregulated, unsure. I'd create clarity. A business or a bar could go, this is legal, this is not, this is licensed. And when I started about 5 years ago working on it, there wasn't the big companies, it was me. And I talked to some prosecutors about it, and gradually we grew the coalition. The governor got on board, retailers got on board. We had a discussion, compromise. How do we solve this? The main opposition was the casinos. They never came to the table, but everybody else, from the VFWs to the Restaurant Association to the people who have the Chuck E. Cheese's and the coin operators, everybody came to the table, and we tried to figure out a way to have a new regulatory path, which, like I said, included every county could ban everything. You rolled the dice if you wanted to be in business, whether or not your county wanted to. I thought that was fair. Casinos opposition. So I thought that was a good policy. And as the years went on, new companies came in. A company bought this company got this company. But I think the way that I handled that, I earned a lot of people's respect because I listened and I was trying to be a statesman about, okay, how do we solve? It's not just about revenue, but it's about how do we solve this, what's legal and what's not legal, and how do we do something that's kind of reasonable without expanding gambling, without kids playing. I voted against sports betting. I voted against the casino at the lake. Both in the legislature, I voted against it, and on the ballot, I voted against both those things. So I'm not a gambler. I just wanted somebody. I think there was a problem in the law that was kind of ambiguous, and there was also a problem of then all these businesses started to have. There's about 30,000 machines there were in the state. The Attorney General seemed like she was on board with a regulated market and to have a regulated structure, and went after games that weren't regulated. I think that's fine. There are illegal games out there around the state that shouldn't be out there. They should not be out there at all. But if we don't change the law, and there's a lawsuit against the Attorney General now, a class action lawsuit, if we don't change the law, then next week somebody will invent something different that's just slightly different from the statute, and it's gray, and then something different and something different. So just like the tax policy, we have to have a comprehensive licensing regulatory structure. And I know that the other candidates in the race have identified that that could be something that they can differentiate themselves with me on. But I think that my approach to it was judicious and thoughtful, and that's why a lot of people respected the way I handled it, because I was consistent and I listened, and I made changes and adjustments based on feedback I got from counties, from companies, from whomever, from the prosecutors. We changed things the prosecutors associated wanted, from the governor's office. It was a process for something that complicated. So I think it's easier characterization to say he's for legalizing games and he's expanding gambling. That's not the way I viewed it. I viewed it as something that really needed to be addressed. And, I feel like I was one of the only, and this may be good or bad, there was a problem. I wanted to address it. I tried to address it in a way that was feasible, realistic, and that, protected people from problem gambling, protected children, that sort of thing. But I'm also the only one who tried to delve into the issue to try to address it. Nobody else filed a bill. Nobody else filed a bill to ban them. Nobody else to criminalize, to regulate, to do whatever. So that's kind of the situation when you try to do something controversial and you try to do it well and fair, and you try to do something that is responsible for the state. And also I'm listening to the VFWs and the bar owners and the municipal government and the highway patrol, and just kind of think, okay, how do we navigate this Rubik's Cube? But that's what happens when you try to solve those problems. But people could rest assured, at least, that as a senator, not just the VLT or the no chance game issue, but any issue like that, we'll take head on, and we'll do it in a reasonable and responsible way.
just quickly, you said about 30,000 machines that are out there now. What would be the economic impact on Missouri if you know that? The other thing that concerns me when I hear about this, and again, not taking a position for or against regarding that, but there is a regulatory issue regarding that. How do we pay for that, considering the budget is in dire straits, right? To add more responsibility to some state agency, whether it be the Highway Patrol or the Gaming Commission, however you do that, somebody has to be the watchdog of that. How do you pay for that?
Yes.
If that happens?
Yeah. So to be clear, first, the impetus for the bill was the regulatory problem and the how do you and what's gray and what's not gray and resolving that. But then going through that, the licensure process and the taxation process would pay for itself. The last fiscal note that we had on my bill estimated in about 5 years around $700 million in revenue for the state. So it gave enforcement authority and money to the Highway Patrol and to prosecutors. And then it also everything that goes into the lottery fund has to go to education. So it's about $400 million for education. And so in a sense, it was a revenue generator. It was a source of raising funds. And I also hear the criticism that, are you raising revenue off the backs of people who are lower income? I don't want to do that. I don't want to exploit the poor in Missouri at all. That's why I think there should be some consumer protections. There should be these protections and surveillance and problem gaming that didn't exist before. I thought that was good, but it's sometimes it's preferable because you have an option of if you want to play the game or not. It's voluntary. That's preferable to raising people's property taxes in a sense. I think as long as we're not exploiting people, we're not expanding the problem of gaming. But so there was a huge fiscal note on the bill, and the fiscal note was positive. It was a source of revenue generation, which is why a lot of groups came and became as the fiscal note started to develop, and it got to $300 million, $600 million, $700 million, based on how the licensing fee were structured. More and more people, as you can imagine, I'm approaching billions of dollars of gross income. More and more people became very interested in it, right? And people I didn't know. And I met them in the process. They came and they're like, "Hey, we're very interested. We had an amendment on there that restored money for disability services. Melanie Stinn out of Springfield put that amendment on there. More people said, "Hey, we want this project for whatever." And just like in the budget process, everybody should. I had a bill that suddenly had hundreds of millions of dollars in it. So I met people from everywhere saying, "I would like $50 million for whatever." And just like any process, try to listen to them and say, "Okay, we have to fund the enforcement apparatus first of illegal gaming. We have to fund the problem gaming and the gambling addiction issues. Now let's talk about, okay, 3% goes to the municipality, 33% goes to public education, that sort of thing." And that was a big conversation to have. But there wasn't a cost associated with the bill. It was all revenue positive for the state to start taxing and having a licensing program.
I think one of the, I don't know that there's an answer to this, and we got to get to a break, but anecdotally, people always assume that, number one, that there will be issues with people having a gambling problem with casinos or this method or sports betting. Do we know percentage-wise the number of people that actually gamble in the state of Missouri that end up with a gambling issue?
Yeah, I don't know the exact percentage. Yeah. I don't know the exact number, but it's just like anything where there's a dopamine cycle in your brain, and it feeds it, and you create. And part of just like we talked about the uncertainty, am I going to win or lose? Fires certain things in your brain, and it becomes very addictive. But there are lots of things. But
sort of video games, by the way.
Video games like that. Actually, the arcade game, even an arcade game in an arcade, will have similar. You take a break, dopamine firing. Yeah, I am concerned. I'm concerned about sports betting, where any child can bet on the phone. A teenager can take a cell phone and start betting. I think that's a problem. But that's it. That's another point I want to make. That's in the Missouri Constitution. So I can't go and say, let's make regulations on teenagers playing on their phone. At this point, I was trying to fix it statutorily so this legislature can make rules and regulations on something.
We're going to go to a break. We'll come back and wrap it up right after this.
Hey, Scott's Event Rentals. 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 Scott's Event Rentals.
Bill Hardwick is the conservative leader we need in the state Senate, an Army combat veteran, a former prosecutor, and a Missouri state representative who has always protected life, defended the Second Amendment, and stood up for our constitutional rights. Bill Hardwick is running to fight for everyday Missourians, not the corporations, not the special interests. Vote Conservative Republican. Army Combat Veteran Bill Hardwick for Missouri State Senate on August 4th.
From the very dawn commercial to 066, he's got.
Bill Hardwick is our guest on Millsap in the Morning. He's running for state senate. That includes Wright, Laclede, Phelps, Pulaski, and Marys County in Missouri. And one of the things that you've been out and about, you're from Pulaski County, you work out of a law firm out of Phelps County. Lebanon and Laclede County is a little different than Pulaski County, in my opinion. Tell me how you see Lebanon and Laclede County different from the other counties in this District 16?
That's a great question. Nobody's asked me that before, but I thought about that.
You know, and I'll tell you that's why I asked those.
Yeah, that's a great question. Every county in the district has a different culture, for sure. There's some commonalities, but there's different culture. So if I classify Phelps County, I mean, it really is Missouri S&T centric. There's very professorial and business associate professorial kind of atmosphere in Phelps County. You know, I mean, just the way people dress, if it's okay. I mean, you're tucking your shirt, you're wearing dress shirts more often in Phelps County. In Pulaski, Pulaski's very different than Laclede and Phelps culturally. Lots of people who are not from Missouri. Right, all over retired from the military, left the military. Their children were stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. They graduated high school at Waynesville. They live in Pulaski, and a lot of veterans, tons of veterans in Pulaski County. Lots of firearms, right? Lots of veterans who own firearms. A little bit of distrust of the government, but strong patriotism. And Laclede has that same kind of patriotism that Pulaski County does. When I go through Laclede, people, they love America. But there's a really healthy distrust of the state government and federal government in Laclede County. That is the government working for us? Are our rights going to be taken away? You know, or is the America that I grew up with going to be the same America we're going to have in the next generation? I feel that a lot in Laclede. I feel that there's a strong Second Amendment county. There's a lot of people who want the government to stay out of their business, but also when the government needs the help, they should do it competently. I feel that sense. But, so Pulaski and Laclede are adjacent to each other, and I feel that patriotism, that love of country in both counties really strongly. There's a lot of American flags, there's a lot of camouflage in both counties.
In one of the commonalities that we do have, and a lot of people forget this, and I sat through a presentation at Rotary just a couple of weeks ago, the importance of Fort Leonard Wood to Pulaski County, obvious, but the importance of Fort Leonard Wood to Laclede County, maybe not quite as obvious unless you've lived here and understand the importance of Fort Leonard Wood.
Yes, so Fort Leonard Wood is a major economic driver of the state. It's one of the biggest employers of the state. Billions of dollars in the economy. And like you said, in Lebanon, there's a lot of folks who drive from Lebanon to Fort Leonard Wood who are DOD civilians or contractors for the Department of Defense. So still there's a lot of that federal military industrial defense apparatus that's bringing money into Laclede County. That's important. I serve on the Missouri Military Preparedness Enhancement Commission, and our job, and I hope to continue to serve if I get elected to Senate. Our job there is we go to the Pentagon, we help shape the National Defense Authorization Act, we talk about the appropriations process, we try to bring force structure to Missouri, we try to make so the environment of the counties around Fort Leonard Wood are the kinds of environments that the Army wants to bring more missions and force structure here, inject more money into our economy, and that means also good schools, that means safe streets, that means safe communities, that means a thriving business community. Those are things the Army looks at if they want to expand, that there's good schools for children to go to, that we're not, there's not high crime rates, stuff like that. So addressing those problems means we get more missions at Fort Leonard Wood. I mean, more missions here means we have more opportunities for contractors, for jobs, and like I talked about, an increased tax base. So success begets more success. So I think there is a good relationship between the Army's mission and Laclede County, Pulaski County, the surrounding communities. And when I came in, that was COVID. That was a difficult year because the post was shut down and businesses were off limits. So that was one of the first problems I had to navigate was, do I go to the Army and say, we're not doing any of this stuff, we're not doing, you guys are off your rocker, right? Because the constituency is mad and the business owners are going out of business, basically. That was our first problem set. Or do I just go to the Army and say, yeah, whatever you want to do is right, whatever you do is fine, the safety first, mission first, we're not going to have any pushback. And so that was the first kind of challenge that was complicated like that. And that really, now that I think about it, that kind of shaped my approach as a state legislator, because I need to be supportive of the Army's mission. I need to be supportive of growing mission at Fort Leonard Wood. That's important. And have good conversations with the commanding general, which everyone that's come to, they've had a good relationship with me. But I also need to go into the barbershop where they're like, we're about to go bankrupt and this isn't working for us. And me think, okay, how do I help solve that problem? Who do I need to talk to at the U.S. Senate level? Who do I talk to at the Army Command? And say, let's get to a pathway. Let's find a roadmap where this business can thrive again. And the people who say, hey, we don't want mass, because there was a while the Army wanted all the surrounding counties to have mass mandates, right? And that was a tension, because there are a lot of people in Laclede County who were like, absolutely not. And there are a lot of people who work for the Department of Defense that were like, well, then we're going to shut you. Nobody's going to go to your businesses. How do I navigate that? How do I navigate the freedom and liberty and the people in the country who want me to push back and this mission that I believe in, the military mission? And so balancing those things and so that's the interesting thing too, not being two-faced about it. That's the trick. Not being one person when I talk to you and one person when I go talk to Ryan, but being consistent, but representing those values at the same time. That's the trick. So the trick is to say, yes, we're not going to have this. They're not going to capitulate to this thing. We're going to push back, but we're going to find a way to be supportive to the military mission and make sure our words and our deeds and our dialogue is constructive. And then we go to the people in the county, right? And we say, look, your concerns, just like in data centers, just like in COVID, just like in take your pick, or the VLT issue, I'm listening to your concerns. We're going to address it, and you're going to be firmly represented, and you're going to have a roadmap to the kind of society you want to live in, where you're free and you have opportunity. So figuring a way to be, the trick is to be the same person when you talk to everybody, but be somebody who's a good listener and a leader to all those parties involved.
I will give you the final word.
I just have a lot of optimism for Laclede County and for our community. And I'm trying to get to know the folks in Laclede County really well. But if I get elected, you can rest assured you're going to have somebody who'll do a good job for you, and just be that kind of representative that I just kind of talked about, somebody who's going to listen and bring us to a place where we're successful.
Bill Hardwick has been our guest on Millsap in the Morning. Don't forget that we have an interview with Missouri Auditor Scott Fitzgerald. This is going to be an important interview because we discuss the economic issues in Missouri, but also Amendment 5. And then tomorrow at 6 o'clock here on Lebanon Now, don't forget we'll be streaming live the town hall meeting on Amendment 5. And I thank Bill Hardwick for the visit today. Don Mayhew will be our guest in a couple of weeks. He's the other candidate for the Senate. Next Wednesday, though, it's Taylor Howes. We talk about July 4th and all the things coming up, and we're going to talk about the Continental Congress and the signing of the Declaration right here on Millsap Now. Well, that's a new show. How about Millsap in the Morning? We'll be back next Wednesday with Millsap in the Morning. So long, everybody.